All right. Well, Parashat Shlach Lecha, if we know anything about it, it's probably the story of the 12 spies. So that's essentially where we're going to start. There are two that are going to be important at the end, and then the other 10 are going to cause some problems, but we'll get to that. And we're going to start by, first of all, looking at where everyone is. Shabbat Shalom from Warsaw. Yes. Okay. Amazing. Michigan. I saw Alabama. I saw LA. I saw Maryland. I saw Colorado, Canada, Edmonton, Alberta. It's a beautiful city. Lots of green space. Rochester is nice too. Toronto, Teaneck, neighbors, Houston, Glasgow. Hello. Florida. Alrighty. Where else? Connecticut, San Francisco, Danbury, Springdale, Arkansas, Massachusetts, Dallas, Portland, represent. Des Moines, represent. San Diego, Kissimmee, beautiful place. Detroit, Rock City, nice. Washington State. All right. So good Shabbos for the people who are further east of me. I'm on the East Coast. And let's get started. So, Shalach Lecha, as you know, typically the name of the Parsha is either the first word or words or the most salient words in the first line, the first verse line of the whole entire portion. So Shalach Lecha is like he's sending out the agents to scout for the land of Canaan, and this is Hashem telling Moshe to send out agents. This is we're still at the point, because Moshe is still alive, that Hashem is communicating directly to Moshe to do these things. So Hashem says something, says it to Moshe, Moshe delegates. After a while, Parashat Yitro is where he learns to delegate, and then things happen. So that's what this is happening. And there's going to be a member of each tribe going out to kind of do a recon mission for the land of Canaan. And they name all of the people from each tribe, but the two that I want to highlight, of course, from the tribe of Judah is Caleb ben Yefune, Caleb, son of Yefune, and the tribe of Ephraim, which is one of the sub-tribes of Joseph. The other one is the tribe of Manasseh, and they do not send anyone from the tribe of Levi. I checked. So you have 12 people because Joseph has split into two tribes at this point. So you have enough people to kind of make that number work. Hoshea ben Nun is from the tribe of Ephraim, and he's important. Does anyone know who Hoshea ben Nun is without looking it up? And I'll show you if anyone can read the Hebrew down here at the bottom to kind of get an idea of, someone's bar mitzvah Parsha. Oh, so you know. And Jenny says Joshua. Yes. So Vayikra Moshe Hoshea ben Nun Yehoshua. So his name changed. And that's something that my rabbi has kind of trained me to be hyper alert to. Anytime someone has a name change, it's very, very important. So for example, Sarai becoming Sarah, Avram becoming Avraham. And there's usually some element of the name of God that gets appended to their name when their name changes, and it indicates a change in status. Elisheba's child, yes. Oh, enlarge the screen. Okay, let's see. There we go. Is that better? Yes. So in this case, Yaakov to Israel, yes. So he struggled with God and with man, or with both, depending on who you get the interpretation from, and prevailed and changed his name. So there's an internal change or an external status change. So for example, Hoshea ben Nun becoming Joshua is the next person in line later on after Moshe dies to take the helm of leadership of the people. So if you notice here, Hoshea ben Nun, Hoshea, means like salvation or save. And then you add a yud here, which is part of the tetragrammaton. Do we know what the tetragrammaton is? It's like the 4-letter name of God. So that's been appended to the beginning. So Hashem is the salvation. Hashem saves. So I think it's really important to always highlight anytime some person's name changes in the Torah, because it indicates some sort of important shift, either in other people's perception of them, their perception of themselves, or both. So the next thing we're going to talk about is what the spies find on their recon mission. So they go to the Wadi Eshkol. Eshkol means cluster. So they found clusters of grapes that were so large they had to be carried by 2 men. And that's just the grapes. There are also pomegranates. There are also figs. It's fantastic. Clearly, this is a place that is fertile, that has plenty, that is going to be very, very arable land, good to grow. And they were there for 40 days scouting. This wasn't just like an overnight thing. They were there for a while. And that's another thing that I also like to pay attention to, that my rabbi kind of drilled into me. Anytime significant numbers show up. So the number 3, the number 12, like the tribes of Israel, there were 12 spies, one from each tribe, except for the tribe of Levi. 40 days, they were scouting the land. They were in the desert for 40 years. So this is also a number that seems to be really important. It's usually like a long period of time during which some sort of introspection or deep thought is happening. And in this case, they're going to kind of be very thorough about their investigation of this land for 40 days. 40 days and 40 nights, the story of Noah and the ark. So a lot of these things are kind of coming back. And it's kind of one of the things I want to point out here is there are a lot of parallels to things in previous parts of Torah that sort of echo to previous things. And I'm going to literally take us back several books later on to kind of show that a lot of these things, even if they're not consciously connected, do kind of have this unconscious callback to things that we've heard before. Also, I'd like to point out that grapes, pomegranates, and figs, along with wheat, barley, olives, and dates, are very important. And do we know why those are important? I'm going to give you a hint. I have named 7 things. Does anyone know? 7 species. Yes, Jenny. Yes, Tanya. Yes, Ian. So the 7 species, they're the first fruits that were acceptable as temple offerings. And they're things that we incorporate into our holidays. Shavuot was the most recent. Some people do it for Sukkot, but Sukkot also has the 4 species. And then also Tu B'Shvat, if that's something you're familiar with. It's one of my favorite holidays, also incorporates the 7 species. So that's also another thing to be thinking about. Yes, the land of milk and honey. 7 also signals completeness, perfection, it's the number of God. Yes. And yes, whoever said milk and honey, that's exactly what I was going to get back to. So this phrase repeats a couple times in this Parsha. So they come back and they say, yeah, this is a fertile land. It's flowing with milk and honey. This is the fruit. And they show the things that they brought with them, this giant cluster of grapes, these pomegranates, these dates, all these beautiful, fertile things. And it sounds great. It seems like there shouldn't be a problem. And yet, I think if anyone who knows this story, who had it for the Bar Mitzvah Parsha, of course, this is not going to be good enough because it never is. So this is, I like to have receipts. I like to cite things. So the first time that we see it specifically in the story of Am Yisrael is a people coming out of the land of Egypt, was when Moshe encountered Hashem in the burning bush. And Hashem tells Moshe that he has heard the crying of the people in Mitzrayim, and he's going to take them to a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So this is the first time we see that. We're going to come back to this Parsha again, to now that I've kind of done my first little time jump here. It's going to be the first of several, and talk about why the fruit isn't good enough. So yes, this is its fruit. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. It's amazing. However, and then you kind of go, oh dear, there's always a but. There's always a but with Am Yisrael. There's always something. So the report from the spies says, well, the people there are really powerful. Their cities are fortified, and there are Amalekites there. If we remember who the Amalekites are, Amalek, never forget Amalek's evil deeds. That's a mitzvah. Yes, the land is occupied and it does belong to other people. Anakites, Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Canaanites, lots of different tribes already living in this region. And the tribe of Amalek is the tribe that we as a people are not supposed to forget because of what they did when people were coming out of Mitzrayim. They attacked from the rear, which is typically where the vulnerable people are, the elderly, the infirm, the children, the women. And that was not okay. And that is part of the reason why we have to remember never to forget, so to speak. And if you're familiar with Safrut, like the scribes, the people who write the Torah, Sofer Stam, the people who write Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzot, one of the ways they test ink actually is to write out the name of Amalek and then cross it out, just to kind of really hammer that point home. And so there were 10 spies. The general, not consensus, but the majority opinion, we'll go with that, was that this was a powerful opposition, a fortified city. We don't really have a chance. Also, there are Nephilim there, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves. What do you think we would have looked like to them? Oh, yes. Thank you, Sarah. Grasshoppers might be the smallest kosher animals. Do we remember what Nephilim are? Back way back in Genesis. They talked about them in Parashat Noach. Yes. Nephilim are giants. So the sons of God coming unto the daughters of men and birthing Nephilim, children of fallen angels, is one of the kind of stories about them. And I want us to look at this last line here, because when I first read this, when I was learning about this Torah portion, I assumed that there was no self-perception here and that there wasn't projection here. But if you notice, it says we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, so we must have looked to them. And I want you to think about what that implies, because this is not something that they're getting from other people. This is something that they're putting onto themselves. They're kind of making this assumption. Oh, well, if we think we're small in the face of this opposition, surely they must think the same thing. And I have to wonder if that's productive or if it's even true. So I want to know what you all think about that, especially with regards to the fact that they're being specifically sent on this mission to do reconnaissance by Hashem by way of Moshe. And then they sort of say, oh, well, I don't think we can do that. We're too small. So if we think we're small, if we think we can't do it, then surely those people probably think we don't stand a chance. Not super helpful. Low self-esteem is one interesting take. Yes, we often feel smaller than we are, especially in a strange place among strange people, a stranger in a strange land, so to speak. Yes, the story of David and Goliath is a really interesting subversion of that. Yes, and the juxtaposition of people on a divine mission with low self-image is also a really interesting thing to think about. These people, according to this story, are being told by God, this is the place I'm going to show you, and I'm going to give this place to you, but they're thinking we can't have it because we're too small. Small is good for spying, but not necessarily good for conquering or holding a land. Yes. In spite of Hashem. I really like the way that Jenny phrased that, in spite of Hashem promising the land. So it's a direct contradiction of what has been directly promised to them. Yes. And it's that is a mortal view of things. And they had won battles in the wilderness before. And yet, and actually, we're going to talk about one of those later. So let's think about how unproductive this is and how this can cause so many issues, like a flaw in one's self-perception, selling oneself short, how it can end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. I do believe someone did put that in here about how it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Bad self-talk, yes. So, of course, I'm sure we've all seen this whole routine before throughout the previous Torah portions. Hashem says something to Moshe. Moshe says it to the people. The people either proceed to try and do it, like with the tabernacle, with the Mishkan. That went really well, but in a lot of instances, it doesn't. Either they fail, or they complain, or they specifically go against their leaders. And then they bring out the old chestnut. Oh, if only we had died in the land of Egypt. You brought us out here only to starve us. You brought us out here only to slaughter us. At least in Egypt, we had this, or at least in Egypt, we had bread. At least in Egypt, we had meat. At least in Egypt, we had water. And you're out here and you're just bringing us out here to die. So all the fun complaints come back out of the woodwork. And why is Hashem taking us to this land only to fall by the sword? They're going to carry off our wives and children. We really should just go back to Egypt. It's terrible here. They're complaining. They're going and complaining to Moshe and Aaron. And yes, they're completely forgetting about Hashem because, of course, they are. We're complaining right now. We're not really even thinking about any kind of divinity. We're really too focused on ourselves. Yes, we're kvetching in a big way. And we've seen this before. This happens a lot. So in the wilderness of Sin, sometimes transliterated as the wilderness of Zin, which I kind of get why, because it looks like sin. So that could be an issue, but it's also kind of a nice pun because they did technically sin by sort of defying Hashem here. And this is on the way to Sinai. So before they got the Torah, received it, and they grumbled, they mumbled, they complained. And once again, this is way back in Exodus. Oh, if only we died at the land of Egypt when we sat by the flesh pots, at least we had bread. You brought us out here only to starve us. How dare you? And that's actually, Gail, that's a really interesting point. The Egyptians might ask for their borrowed gold and jewels back. That's a good point, because I think the implication there was that they would not have to see these people again. So yeah, that could be awkward. And Stephanie Baruch says, perhaps they didn't want to take responsibility to confirm the land was how Hashem said it would be. Everything they needed was being provided while they were in the desert, and now they had to be self-sufficient. So this is also a much deeper thing that I want to point out here, that this wilderness that they're in, the imagery of Bamidbar, of in the wilderness, is typically a place of deep personal growth and introspection and communion with God. And you're going to be transitioning from this kind of embryonic state of having your needs directly provided for. Once they go into the land, there's going to be a state change, and perhaps they just don't feel ready for that. That's something that might be worth considering. Like maybe it's always easier to stay in something uncomfortable if it's familiar, or something unsafe if it's familiar, or something actively harmful if it's familiar. This is something that you see a lot in people who are enduring abuse. It's really hard to leave if it's familiar. It's what you're used to. And leaving implies a state change that you may feel that the fear of leaving may be greater than the fear of staying. And that's usually when the growth happens, is when the pain of remaining in that place is greater than the potential pain of leaving and perhaps going to something better. So that's something I want everyone to think about as well. Like if you think about this relationship between Am Yisrael and Hashem as a relationship between two entities, and in some cases it's kind of reified as a relationship between two people. The Torah is a ketubah. This is a marriage. It's a brit, it's a covenant. If you think about it, it's almost like the Israelites were in an abusive relationship with Mitzrayim, with Pharaoh, with their taskmasters, and Hashem brought them out of that. And now they're in this place where they're kind of getting mandatory therapy, and they don't want to leave the comfort of the 5-day a week, 6-day a week without Shabbat therapy sessions. And their therapist wants to kind of move them into group therapy, and they're just not ready for that yet. So that's kind of the thing that I think about in terms of this relationship between Hashem and Am Yisrael as like an interpersonal relationship almost. And this is kind of one of the times when it fractures just a little bit, because there's a lack of trust, which is kind of understandable when your people have been enslaved for 400 years. So I do feel a little bit of sympathy for them. Now I'm going to read some of these comments. Freedom from is not good. Freedom to is necessary also. Yes, I do agree with that. I think that's beautiful, and I completely agree. And yes, actually, Moshe did do something similar. He believed that he couldn't speak well enough to do what he was being asked by Hashem, and yet he grew into it. And not only that, Hashem provided an accommodation. Hashem said, go get your brother. Your brother will speak for you. You will be the one who speaks directly to me. And then Aharon will be the people, will speak to be kind of like the people facing individual. And better the devil you know than the one you don't. Yes. And Bamaya says, leave the pain. Yes, that is true. You leave the pain of Mitzrayim to go into the desert. And then, of course, complain a great deal about the desert and the fact that, oh no, we can't eat. But wait, Hashem is literally raining down manna from heaven. Oh no, we have no meat. But then Hashem literally rains down quail from heaven. Oh no, we don't have water. Moshe goes by a rock, strikes it, and you get water. And yet you still complain. So that's a whole other thing. And Hashem responds to their needs in the desert directly, addresses their needs directly. Every single one literally gives it to them from heaven. And they still manage to mess it up. So Hashem, of course, sees this as a test because also fair, setting boundaries in a relationship like this is very important. So this is an example of setting boundaries. So Hashem puts out the manna. Hashem says, this is how it's going to work. Don't take too much. Take only a certain amount for each household, for each person. Don't take extra on Shabbos. There won't be any. Take your extra portion on the 6th day. Don't worry about it. I will take care of you. And I don't know if you've seen Arrested Development, but there's a voiceover. The guy who plays Opie from Ron Howard has a voiceover in Arrested Development. So it's kind of like Hashem is saying, I'll test them to see whether they follow my instructions or not. And then Ron Howard is saying, they did not. So some people take too much manna. Some people do leave it out overnight and then it's covered in maggots the next day. Some people go out on Shabbos and there is no manna because Hashem said there wasn't going to be any manna and you went out anyway. And I also want to point out that another little Shavuot connection, at least for me, is that each household was meant to gather one omer per person in a household. So if you're familiar with the preparations for Shavuot, you count the omer. So an omer is like a sheaf of barley, and that's what you brought to the temple. And then at Shavuot, you would celebrate. It was originally a harvest holiday. So I always thought that was kind of cool. And that there was an omer that was kept for all time in the temple after the fact to remember once again that Hashem cared for the people and provided for them directly. And yet they complained. So this was also, Hashem provided manna and then they complained again because there wasn't water. Give us water to drink. If only we had died in Egypt. You brought us out here. We're going to die of thirst. And then Moshe, of course, is like, these people are getting really upset. They might actually stone me. And this is also something that happens later, the threat of imminent death, because it seems like the anger tends to escalate really quickly when the people start grumbling, which is why it's dangerous, because they might actually kill their leader, which is an issue, obviously, because we've seen what they do without a leader. They really need a leader. And this specific period here is also the first time, not the second time. The second time was the bad time. This is the first time that Moshe strikes a rock and gets water. This is also one of the battles with the Amalekites, the people of Amalek, the people that we have to remember to forget and remember not to forget their deeds, but forget their name. And this is also the one, if anyone has read, where for as long as Moshe holds up his staff, they will win. And he gets tired, so he has to have two people on either side holding up his hands so that they can win the battle. So, and the leader of that battle is Joshua, or at that time, Hoshea ben Nun, before he gets the name change and the super epic kind of leveling up, so to speak. And this one is actually a little bit different. There is an escalation here. So not only are they saying, oh, if only we died in Egypt, you brought us out here to die. We could have just been in Egypt, at least by the flesh pots. We had food, we had water, we had what we needed. It sucked, but at least we were provided for. And they're kvetching in the desert. This time they're specifically saying, lead us back. We want to go back. They're not saying, oh, if only we had. No, this is like, this is action now. This isn't just complaining. This is a problem. And it says Moshe and Aharon fell on their faces. And there's this, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. And Yoshua, Ben Nun, and Caleb, the two spies who actually brought back positive reports, well, specifically Caleb did, and then Yoshua kind of joined him. They rent their clothes. If we are familiar with renting of the clothes, that's a sign of mourning, which is fair, because the Rambam commentary I read about this was that they were going to take a new leader. They were going to mutiny, get a new leader specifically to take them back to Egypt. So I think Yoshua ben Nun and Caleb ben Yefune had something to mourn about, because if they were going to stone Moshe, the man who led them across the Sea of Reeds, I don't know what they would have done to Joshua and Caleb, but I don't imagine it would have been very good. So this escalation is extremely dangerous. And I want you to kind of think about that. So they rent their clothes, but they also decided to still try and reason with them, which is a very brave thing to do. This is extremely courageous. And this is also an example of courage being not necessarily an absence of fear, but having fear, but still doing what needs to be done anyway, which is one of the reasons why these two are my favorite. Caleb specifically is one of my favorite people in the whole of Torah, because he's an extremely brave man. So they insist, they keep going back to the truth, which was that the land is good. The land flows with milk and honey. Hashem said that they would give it to us. Just don't rebel. Don't do what you're clearly about to do. Don't be afraid of those people. And they're our prey. Their protection has departed from them. Don't be afraid of them. And then they get threatened with stones, which is an issue. And if you remember earlier, Moshe was afraid of specifically that. Moshe was afraid that the people were going to stone him. And once again, in this case, we see an escalation. He's afraid of it, but also in this case, they're like actually about to do it. So we once again see that kind of dangerous overreach of what is essentially at this point a mob, an angry mob of people. Like you can imagine the two of them being like, it's land flowing with milk and honey. Their protections departed from them. We're going to be okay. And then like angry people just kind of picking up rocks and kind of walking closer to them is kind of how I imagine it. And they're still kind of trying to talk. And I also want to point out their protection has departed from them. I also read this in a commentary. Zilam is a shadow. So it's the idea that their shadow has left them, the thing that covers them and keeps them safe has departed from them, meaning that they're kind of exposed. They're vulnerable. So yes, you may think you're grasshoppers and you're assuming that they think you're grasshoppers, but what's actually happening is there's an opening. You need to exploit that opening, go in there and get it done. But of course, the people aren't listening because this is a stiff-necked people. This is a people of kvetching. They're not listening. They're picked up the rocks. They're about to go in and potentially kill these people. And Moshe himself, the stoning not delegated by Hashem, but by their own emotion and their own understanding. Yes, Juliet. Yes, that's exactly what's happening here. This is what happens when they don't listen to Hashem. They take matters into their own hands, or in this case, stones. It's a problem. And once again, Moshe has to go up to Hashem and be like, please don't kill these people. Please don't murder these people. Don't do that. I know you want to, but don't do that. And of course, Hashem is frustrated and exasperated, speaking to Hashem's representative. They don't have any faith in me. I've literally done all of these things. You know what? Fine. I'm gonna disown them. I'm gonna strike them down with pestilence. I'm done. And this happens a lot. The kind of arguments that Hashem and Moshe have, this idea of like, I'm just done with these people. I just cannot deal with these people. I'm just going to strike them down. It's fine. I'm just going to strike them down, scrap the whole project, maybe do something else. And Moshe is like, please don't do that. And this poor man always has to reason with God to prevent God from killing the people. And he reminds Hashem that, well, this could be a bit of an optics problem because you specifically promised us, you made a brit, you made a pact, you made a covenant that you were going to bring us out from Egypt and you were going to do something great with us. You were going to build us into a great nation. And yet here you are threatening to kill us. That's an issue. Because if you slay these people, it says wholesale, but the Hebrew, it basically means like to one man or to a man, to the last man. So like everybody, if you slay everybody, which presumably based on the wording of this Hebrew was the plan, was just annihilation, then people are going to say bad things about you. All the nations who've heard all these amazing things about you, this amazing God, clearly this God was powerless to perform the promise that they made, because this God brought them out of Egypt only to kill them in the wilderness. You'd basically be proving all the kvetches right, all the naysayers right, all the people who said that you couldn't do it, that these people were too small, all of these people, all the naysayers, all of the people who were trying to lead Am Yisrael astray, all of the other groups of people, the Amalekites who came in and tried to attack from the rear and attack the vulnerable, all of those people will be vindicated. And that's not what you want, because you want to make your name great. And this is not how you do it. I get that you're upset, but please, please, please don't murder these people. And so Hashem relents, because thank goodness Hashem is merciful. Of course, Hashem needs a little bit of reasoning with. And yes, this is kind of a don't embarrass yourself in front of the neighbors. What are they going to think? What will the neighbors think? What will the nations think? All these people around us, like they're going to look and say, this God has issues. Like, what is happening with this God? This God leads his people out of this one place, corrals them into the desert to kill them. Like, no, that's not okay. And that's the people who would be attacking Am Yisrael who would be saying that. So just imagine how bad that makes this God look. Not great. Ashanda for the Goyim, yes. And so Hashem is kind of getting a little bit mollified here. You know, your forbearance is so great. You're slow to anger. You're abounding in forgiveness. You forgive iniquity and transgression. Kind of like, you're nice. You're a nice God. You're a nice God, right? You're not going to kill us. That's great. You're not going to kill us. Please forgive us. Please don't hurt us. Please don't kill us. And then this is kind of the crux of this parasha here. This is a compromise. It's a pretty harsh compromise, but it is a compromise. It's better than death. So what Hashem says back to Moshe is, yeah, okay, fine. I'm not going to kill him, but what I am going to do is that the people who tried me, the people who disobeyed me, the people who rebelled against me are not going to see the promised land. That's take it or leave it. That's what I've got. But Kalev ben Yefune HaKenizi of the tribe of Yehudah and Yeshua ben Nun of the tribe of Ephraim, the two of them, they will see the promised land, because the two of them were the two people who held fast and stayed true and didn't kind of go with the crowd of people who were trying to lead everyone astray, spread calumnies, as it said earlier, about the other 10 spies, about the quite frankly, the completely wrong perception of this small but mighty people who can really do anything that Hashem allows them to do. And Hashem allows them to do quite a lot. Hashem performs miracles for them, performs signs and wonders for them, helps them overcome a much more powerful nation, a much more powerful people, escapes, takes spoils with them, by the way. They took gold and spoils from Mitzrayim. I don't think the Egyptians would have just let anybody do that. But 10 plagues tends to change people's minds. And yet these people still denied everything that happened by virtue of their lack of faith that these miracles, these wonders would continue. And so, as a compromise, so that they don't all get murdered, just gonna kind of let the ranks thin out a little bit. Let them stay in the desert. And do we remember how long they stayed in the desert? This is one of those important numbers. We've got 3, we've got 7, we've got 12. 40 years. Yes. So this is another thing my rabbi said was, yes, it could have been 40 years because Kalev ben Yefune HaKenizi, cool name, which is why I say the whole thing, was rather old when it was time to go into the promised land, he was in his 80s, I think. And he was still kind of like amazing. He reminded Yoshua ben Nun of the promise of the land that he was going to get. And as an 80-year-old, he was like, okay, well, I mean, that's great. I want my land, but I'm willing to go conquer it myself. And he did. So it could be 40 years. And it could also be an indication of the time needed to maybe kind of sit in a corner and think about what you did. Have some introspection, have some time to kind of burnish yourself, as it were, because there are clearly some things that need working out. The people are still clearly rough around the edges if they're willing to stone their leaders, mutiny, and then anoint another leader to take them back to the place that Hashem did all of this work to bring them out of, to go into this new land that apparently they just aren't ready for, which is fine. And this is one of those instances where I kind of read the Torah as like a nice therapeutic metaphor. Like maybe they need this space they need stasis because they're just not ready. If they had gone in, who knows what would have happened? Maybe they just weren't ready. And so for this 40-year period, they just need to stay here for a bit. They need a year for each day the spies spent in the land. Excellent. And yeah, so they need this powerful mystical number that represents this time that you spend in a wilderness, literally for them, but perhaps for us figuratively, a time that you need to kind of really think about what you're doing, especially if you're in a place where you think that Mitzrayim is behind you, Eretz Israel is ahead of you, but you're not quite ready for that yet, if that makes sense. And obviously, we don't have an intermediary who is bowing and pleading before a God who is ready to annihilate us. But what we do have is a world that's kind of scary, and a world in which change often feels difficult and frightening and uncomfortable and terrifying for a lot of us, because we've seen a lot of changes in our time, and I don't know how many of them have been good. Some of them have, and yet we as a people are still here. So clearly is going right. And I think every now and again, you need to take that time to just sort of step back, introspect, before you pick up stones, start screaming, start throwing them at your leaders. Maybe just kind of, okay, what is happening? Do I see myself as a grasshopper? Does everyone else look like Nephilim? What is actually happening here? What is the truth? What is that still small voice that we hear about in the Haftarah? The still small voice inside, not the wind, not the rain, not the lightning, not the thunder, not the big fanfare, the still small voice that is speaking the truth. What is that saying? And I think sometimes we need to take that time to hear that still small voice. And then perhaps once we hear it and we believe it, which also takes time, then we can move forward. So those are my thoughts. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Kalev ben Yefuneh HaKenizi was 80, 2 times 40. Yes, he lived another 40 years. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Tanya. And let's see, Stephanie Baruch also says 40 years should have allowed them to forget the influence that Egypt had on them. Almost 2 generations. Yes, that's another thing that I've heard a couple times about. One of the potential reasons why they were in the desert for so long was because they had to learn how to be free. They had been slaves for 4 centuries at this point, or they had been in Egypt for 4 centuries at least. So they had to become a people in their own right. They had to learn what liberation was. And they also had to learn that they could trust this God that had brought them out of Egypt. So they're doing a lot of things here. And it's not just one person doing those things. We can have however long our life is of therapy, and we can heal. You have to think about this as individual traumas of each person, but then also the collective trauma of slavery in Mitzrayim. So that's going to take a lot more time. Yes, 40 years negated 400 years of bondage. But it took a lot of time. Yes, the grasshopper feeling is real, and it's very easy to get into that mindset. And I think one of the most amazing things about Am Yisrael, especially as it relates to the Torah, is this idea of being small but mighty. And I really think that stories like this one, and also stories like David and Goliath, I think the reason why they're in our texts is to remind us that just because we're small doesn't necessarily mean that we're weak. Just because we're small doesn't mean we can't take down something significantly bigger than us. Us as individual Jews, also us as a group. And someone's asking me to share a little bit about myself and my background. Yeah, sure. So I'm actually a Hebrew school teacher. I teach kindergarten. I think they're amazing. They're beautiful, beautiful humans, and reminding that everything is good in the world. And it's a beautiful thing. They are kind of part of the reason why I do this, is because I feel like if I can't explain it to a confused 5-year-old who barely knows what being Jewish means, then like maybe I don't quite get it. And that's another thing that they remind me every day, that you can be small but mighty. These little kids, they say the most profound, beautiful, amazing things. And I take a lot of inspiration from them. Actually, one of the things they said with regards to Yaakov and Israel, someone mentioned earlier, was we talked about the mysterious man, the stranger that comes to wrestle Yaakov in the night. And I didn't finish. I read half of the Torah portion up to that point, didn't tell them what happened after that, and then asked them a series of questions, one of which was, who do you think the stranger was? And some of the answers they came up with were just mind-blowing. Some of them said God, some of them said an angel, because like some of them had heard the story before, but those who hadn't said things like he was wrestling his shadow, or he was wrestling himself, or he was wrestling with his past. And his past was one of deceit. He lied, he took shortcuts, he cheated to get what he wanted, and he had to face up to that. These are 8-year-olds. This was a 3rd grade class, a group of 8-year-olds who said things like this. So yes, thank you for complimenting my teaching, but you have to give credit to these kids, because a lot of the wisest insights that I've gotten about Torah have been from people under the age of 10. So,
do you want to wrap up here?
Yes, I would love to wrap up here. So I think if there's anything I want people to take away from this, it's first of all that small people, whether that's kids, or if you feel small, you or us as a people, because we make up like 0.02% of the world's population, can do really, really big, mighty things. There's a reason why Judaism is considered one of the major world religions, despite the fact that we're tiny. All of these things are connected. If you think of Torah in the way that you think of Jewish time, in that it's cyclical, and it's not necessarily a flat circle, like you've heard the phrase time is a flat circle. I think it might be Nietzsche, but I can't remember. It's more of a spiral. So yes, we kind of tread back on the path that our ancestors took, but we also kind of move up a little bit if we're doing our jobs correctly. We are elevating a little bit, but we're also still following in the footsteps of the people who came before us, which I think is one of the most brilliant things about having a Torah cycle, because every single time we go through each Parasha, at least for me, I see something new. I learn something new. I think we should all learn something new. And that's part of the reason why I did all of these time jumps between Exodus and Numbers, because a lot of these things are going to repeat themselves, and they're doing that for a reason. They're trying to reinforce really important lessons that we all need to learn. And also, even for me personally, this is a reminder that faith is important, that even it's not necessarily blind faith either, because in this case, Hashem literally rained things down from heaven and people still didn't believe. Literally rained things down from heaven, parted a sea, people walked on dry land, from an army that was trying to kill them with the spoils of Egypt, and they still complained. So if they can still complain, then maybe we should think about ourselves in the time in which we live and maybe have a little more compassion for them, but also hold ourselves to a higher standard. And also to remember that this is our story too, which is why it's still relevant. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Yasmin, for your amazing teaching and amazing teaching style, as always. We'll see you all next week, and I'll send out a recording later today. All right, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.